I found myself standing in my bedroom, staring out into the darkness. My heart raced, anticipation mixing with guilt, but I couldn't turn away. I knew I was crossing a line, but desire overruled caution. The moment had arrived, the one I had been dreading and yearning for in equal measure. I turned away from the window just as he stepped into the room. Nathan, my neighbor, stood there with a smirk on his face, eyes filled with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. He was magnetic, the kind of man who made everyone around him feel the gravity of his presence. I knew this was wrong, and yet, every fiber of my being screamed at me to move forward. He closed the distance between us, and I didn't step back. His hands traced the curve of my waist, pulling me closer until I could feel his breath on my neck. "This is madness," I muttered, half to myself, but I knew I was already lost. When his lips found mine, the world around us melted away. All that remained was the heat of the kiss, the surge of emotions that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. As our lips parted, reality began to seep back in. I stepped away, my mind racing. "Nathan, we can't keep doing this," I said, voice trembling with fear and desire. "I'm married, and so are you." He sighed, running a hand through his tousled hair. "I know, Clara," he whispered, "but I can't help how I feel about you." His words lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken promises and forbidden love. I stared at him, my heart hammering in my chest. A million thoughts raced through my mind, each one more confusing than the last. I had to get out of there, to escape the whirlwind of emotions threatening to consume me. Turning on my heel, I left the room, shutting the door behind me. But even as I walked away, I knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Nathan had moved into the neighborhood a year ago. At first, he was just a friendly face I saw occasionally. We'd wave from our driveways or exchange a few polite words when we bumped into each other while walking our dogs. I didn't think much of him beyond the superficial. I had a husband, Mark, and the life I was content with, or so I thought. But as time went on, Nathan and I began to cross paths more frequently. Our conversations grew longer, our laughter more genuine. I started looking forward to those moments, the way he made me feel seen and understood. Unlike Mark, who had grown distant, buried in his work and seemingly indifferent to my presence, Nathan made me feel alive again. He noticed the small things, like when I changed my hairstyle or wore a new dress. He listened, really listened when I spoke. It was intoxicating, this newfound attention, and it slowly began to unravel the neat, orderly life I had built with Mark. The day it all began was innocent enough. Nathan and I were outside, chatting casually as we watered our gardens. It was a warm afternoon, the sun shining brightly as we exchanged stories about our lives. At one point, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering a moment too long. That single touch sent a shockwave through me, igniting feelings I had kept buried for so long. That was the moment I knew we had crossed an invisible line, a line that couldn't be uncrossed. From then on, our interactions were laced with a tension that neither of us acknowledged, but both of us felt. Glances became longer, touches became more frequent, and the air between us thickened with unspoken desire. We both knew it was dangerous, that it could ruin everything we had built in our lives. Yet, like moths drawn to a flame, we couldn't stay away. Weeks passed, and my resolve weakened with every stolen glance. every fleeting brush of his hand against mine. My marriage with Mark continued on its monotonous path, each day blending into the next. Meanwhile, my feelings for Nathan grew, swirling inside me like a storm. I knew what was happening was wrong, but in his presence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: passion. And now here we were, standing on the precipice of a choice that would change everything. As I walked down the hallway after leaving him in the bedroom, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Pulling it out, I saw a text from Mark. "Working late again, don't wait up." I sighed, my grip tightening around the phone. It was always the same excuse, the same hollow words that left me feeling more alone than ever. A voice in my head screamed at me to turn back, to forget Nathan, to try and fix my crumbling marriage. But then I remembered the warmth of Nathan's touch, the way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Before I could stop myself, I turned back to the bedroom. Nathan was still there, his eyes searching mine for some indication of what I was thinking. Without saying a word, I closed the door behind me and walked towards him, my heart pounding in my chest. He opened his arms and I fell into them, letting the emotions I had held back for so long finally spill over. "Clara, are you sure?" he whispered, his voice tinged with both hope and fear. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. At that moment, I didn't care about the consequences. I just needed to feel something real, something that reminded me I was still alive. And with that thought, I closed the distance between us, letting go of everything else but this one forbidden moment. Nathan's lips found mine, tentative at first, as if he was testing the depth of my resolve. But when I responded, threading my fingers through his hair and pulling him closer, the hesitation melted away. His kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more demanding. His hands roamed my back, tracing the curve of my spine as he pressed me against him. The world outside ceased to exist. There was no right or wrong, only the intense desire building between us. He pulled me toward the bed, our lips parting only long enough to catch a breath before reconnecting in a fevered frenzy. I felt his hand slide under my blouse, the warmth of his touch sending shivers across my skin. In one fluid motion, he peeled away the fabric, exposing me to the cool air and the heat of his gaze. His eyes drank me in, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch as he took in every inch of me. Then, with a growl of need, he pushed me onto the bed, following me down, his weight pinning me beneath him as he continued his exploration of my body. Our movements grew desperate, frantic, as if we were both trying to grasp onto something we had been denied for far too long. His hands, his lips, his body moved against mine in a rhythm that felt both familiar and thrillingly new. Every touch, every gasp, every whispered name filled the room with an intensity that left us breathless. In that moment, nothing else mattered, just the two of us, tangled together in a whirlwind of passion, seeking solace in each other's embrace.